Welcome back to Hem and Her. Today I'll be making gnocchi. Switching up the camera angles this time just because I feel like it's a little easier to watch and hopefully no one will get motion sickness now. So I've just taken 2 small potatoes out of the oven and now I'm peeling them after I cut them in half. You want to cook these potatoes until they're fork tender so you can stab them with a fork and there's no resistance. So now I'm putting the potatoes in a ricer. I recommend if you want to make a gnocchi that you invest in one of these things. There are a few recipes out there that say you can use a fork to mash your potatoes, but what I end up seeing is that the potatoes become overworked and gummy by the time you get them to a nice consistency. Also, the problem with a lot of recipes out there is that they're not very precise. Some of them call for 1 potato per 1 cup of flour, which makes no sense at all because potatoes vary in size. So right now I'm measuring how much cooked potato I have and creating my own recipe. So I'm going off the cuff here, which is pretty much how I do all my cooking. I ended up measuring about 170 grams of cooked potato. Now I'm adding 1 egg yolk. I'm not going to use all of this flour in the container, but at the end of the recipe, I ended up using 60 grams of all-purpose flour. You want to use about 3/4 of that 60 grams right now just to incorporate in with the potato. Using only the bench scraper here, you want to chop everything together and avoid using your hands. If you don't own a bench knife or bench scraper, I do recommend getting one. It's a cheap investment and it'll make your life a lot easier. You want to add some salt to the dough, which I forgot to do in the beginning, because otherwise it'll end up tasting like nothing. Fun fact, there are other types of gnocchi which do not use potato, such as ricotta gnocchi and Parisian gnocchi, which uses a choux batter, Chaux, which is also the base of making cream puffs. So if you didn't know that already, you learned something new today. As the dough starts to come together here, I'm adding a little bit more flour and conserving some just to dust at the end as I cut the gnocchi. You can now start working it with your hands to develop some gluten in there, but you do not want to overwork it or it'll become too gummy. Here the bench scraper comes in handy again, so you want to scrape all that flour off of your board or table and roll it back into the dough so you don't have to use any excess flour. Now you want to start forming the dough into a nice log. I like to cut in half so it's easier to work with. So now you take some of that flour you conserved to help you roll the dough into a long rope. The rope should be roughly a 1-inch diameter, depending on how big you like your gnocchi. You want to try to move pretty quickly here, as you don't want a lot of that flour to absorb into the dough and preventing it from getting tacky and wet again. When rolling the logs, you want to apply even, gentle pressure between the 2 hands and in a slight outward motion to try to prevent uneven or thin spots in that rope. If possible, try to make a more attractive face than I do while doing this. I didn't get to mention this earlier, but you do want to rice the potatoes and make the dough when the potatoes are hot. The consistency when you make it from cold potatoes is just different and not as light and tender. A little bit of ASMR there for you. Now that your ropes are rolled out, you want to get a paring knife and lightly flour it so that the gnocchi doesn't stick to your knife while you cut them. And then, like magic, all your gnocchi are cut. Now that you have the gnocchi cut, you want to dust it with the rest of the flour just so they don't stick to each other. So now you have used all of the 60 grams of flour. You can, if you want, indent the gnocchi with the tines of a fork. I don't usually bother because it's a pain in the ass, and I think the sauce sticks to them anyway just because they have enough starch content. But I'll show you when I did here. You can faintly see the grooves. I look like my cat just died. You want to get a pot of hot water on the stove, not too deep. If you take one thing away from this, just know to always season your pasta water. Bench scraper makes another appearance here. Definitely want to use it while dropping the gnocchi into the water. The less contact you have with the gnocchi in your hands, the fewer chances you'll have misshaping it. If you don't want to cook all the gnocchi at once, they do very well in the freezer in a lightly floured container. We're going to put some butter in a separate saute pan and get it lightly browned. You want to make sure the water holding the gnocchi is at a simmer and not at a rapid boil. This will give the gnocchi a smaller chance of it falling apart in the water. I'm doing a pretty simple application to the gnocchi, just a brown butter sauce with peas and a little bit of black pepper and cheese on top, but you can definitely do a gnocchi bolognese. Gnocchi with pesto goes well with a lot of sauces, pretty much up to you. If your brown butter is done before your gnocchi is, you can just set it off to the side. You're looking for the gnocchi to float to the top of the water, and then you can take one out and it should be slightly firm to the touch. Really wanted to use a Michael Scott line there, but I stopped myself. Trying not to burn myself here to give you a better view. Now you're going to add the gnocchi to the pan of butter. You don't want to drain all of the pasta water because you're going to end up using some of it for the sauce. Adjust your heat accordingly here. Once you get all the gnocchi in the pan, I like to keep it moving just because I don't want it to stick to the bottom of the pan, and I'm not really trying to get that hard of a sear on it. Some of them do end up sticking to the bottom of the pan like they did here. Just lightly lift them off with a spatula. Using a fish spatula here because all of my utensils are in the dishwasher right now. Once you get the desired color on the gnocchi you want, lower your heat. I'm using my residual heat here as I'm adding the final touches to it. Just adding a little bit of salt here. I've gotten used to cooking with these induction burners by using their residual heat and not actually having the burner itself on. But every stove is different, so try to adapt to the temperature accordingly. I'm just warming the peas through here. I'm going to start adding some pasta water to create the sauce at the end. It is very important to keep the pan in a swirling motion, again because you don't want anything to stick. At the end here, I'll finish it off with a little bit of butter, or the culinary term is to mount it with butter. You definitely want to have the heat off or on very low here just because you do not want the butter to break or you'll have an oily sauce. So I just added a little bit more pasta water at the end to bring it all together. And now you'll see there's a nice emulsification here. If I was in a restaurant, I'd probably add a lot more butter and some more pasta water just to have a nice saucy gnocchi. Hit it with a few turns of freshly cracked black pepper just to spice it up a little bit. And notice I said freshly cracked. You might as well just throw it in the trash if you're going to use pre-ground black pepper. We're going to plate it up and make it look somewhat nice here. Spread it out a little bit. And just in case you thought it wasn't rich enough, add some grated cheese on top. And there you have it, restaurant quality gnocchi. Hashtag Natty Light. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe. Let me know what you'd like me to cook next in the comments below, and to visit my website hemandherfood.com to schedule your own virtual private lesson with friends, family, or coworkers. Thanks.